Put down your phone for a second and look at your hands. Now imagine that everything we associate with getting high disappears. No pills, no chemist, no pharmacy, no dealer, sending you a message that somehow contains 7 fire emojis and absolutely no useful information. You are standing 12,000 years ago with empty hands, a nervous system built for anxiety, and a brain that occasionally becomes curious about what reality would feel like if somebody loosened a few screws. So what do? The obvious answer is that you stay sober. The archaeological answer is apparently not. Long before laboratories learned to purify a molecule, people were fermenting grain, chewing bitter leaves, burning powerful plants inside enclosed spaces, swallowing dangerous mixtures, dancing until their bodies stopped behaving normally, fasting, chanting, drumming, and deliberately pushing the mind beyond its ordinary borders. But there is a trap hidden inside this story. Ancient people did not divide substances into our neat modern categories. Medicine over here, recreation over there, religion on Sunday, bad decisions after midnight. For them, the same plant might numb pain, summon an ancestor, settle a stomach, mark a funeral, terrify an initiate, or make a very long night feel like it had opened a door in the sky. And the strangest part is that the first drug laboratory was not a building. It was the human body. To understand how ancient humans got high, we first have to understand why the world was already full of chemical keys, and why our brains came with locks that those keys could open. Your brain is not a calm executive processing reliable information. It is a wet electrical parliament in which billions of cells shout, negotiate, exaggerate, and occasionally approve a decision nobody remembers proposing. Every feeling you have depends partly on chemical signals moving between those cells. Alertness, pain, fear, pleasure, memory, the sense that time is passing normally, even the quiet conviction that you are a stable person located inside your own skull. Change the signals, and you change the meeting. Alcohol strengthens some of the brain's braking systems. Stimulants can increase the activity of chemicals associated with attention and reward. Opioids imitate signals involved in pain relief. Cannabis compounds interact with a system that already helps regulate appetite, memory, mood, and stress. Some hallucinogenic molecules interfere with serotonin signaling and can radically alter perception. Plants did not evolve these chemicals because they wanted humans to discover spirituality behind a bush. Many compounds discourage insects, resist infection, or make an animal regret eating the same leaf twice. Humans, however, are the kind of animal that tastes a defensive poison, feels unusual, and thinks, interesting. Perhaps the amount was the problem. That is where culture enters the story. One accidental encounter is poisoning. Repeated observation becomes knowledge. Knowledge shared across generations becomes technique. Technique wrapped in rules, songs, specialists, and meaning becomes ritual. And one of the earliest techniques required no rare plant at all. It required sugar, water, warmth, and the microscopic labor of organisms nobody could see. Leave sweet fruit sitting long enough, and wild yeast begins eating its sugars. The yeast produces carbon dioxide and ethanol, which is a wonderfully technical way of saying that microbes consume your lunch and leave behind bubbles and poor judgment. Ancient humans did not need to understand microbiology to notice the result. A pile of crushed fruit in a hollow, rainwater mixed with honey, wet grain forgotten in a container. Any of these could begin fermenting. The first person to drink the result probably had no vocabulary for alcohol. They only knew that the sour liquid made warmth spread through the body, pain moved farther away, strangers become more interesting, and dancing seemed like an idea with no possible downside. Finding the first alcoholic drink is almost impossible because liquid disappears and organic containers decay. Archaeology rarely preserves somebody's Tuesday evening. It preserves stone, pottery, residue, and whatever people were thoughtful enough to spill in a place that later became a research site. At Rakefet Cave, in what is now Israel, researchers studied stone mortars used by Natufian people roughly 13,000 years ago. Starch remains and wear patterns were interpreted as evidence that grains were processed and fermented into a beer-like drink, probably connected to communal funeral feasts. This was not a clear bottle of strong liquor. Distillation would arrive thousands of years later. The drink may have been thick, inconsistent, and low in alcohol. It was probably closer to fermented grain porridge that had developed social ambitions. But strength is not the only point. Fermentation transformed food into an experience. It could soften grief, energize a gathering, and make a group feel emotionally synchronized. The dead were being remembered. The living were eating and drinking together. And chemistry was helping turn separate nervous systems into one collective event. That pattern will keep returning. Ancient intoxication was often not a private escape carried home in a pocket. It happened at a feast, a burial, an initiation, or a ceremony where other people controlled the setting and interpreted what the experience meant, which becomes important when the substance is much less forgiving than weak beer. Imagine walking through a prehistoric landscape. To you, it is vegetation. To an experienced gatherer, it is an enormous chemical database with thorns. One leaf reduces hunger, another dulls pain. One root helps you sleep, another makes your heart race. A seed causes visions. A nearly identical seed causes a funeral. There are no printed instructions. The dosage guide is memory. The quality control system is the weather. And customer support is an elder looking at you with the exhausted expression of someone who specifically told you not to eat that. This is why psychoactive knowledge would have been valuable and dangerous. Learning it required long observation. Which part of the plant should be used? During what season should it be collected? How old should it be? How should it be prepared? What could it be combined with? And who should be allowed to consume it? Some of the clearest early evidence comes from chewing. In the Nanchoc Valley of northern Peru, archaeologists found coca leaves associated with house floors dating to about 8,000 years ago. They also found calcite, an alkaline material that helps release the plant's active compounds during chewing. This does not mean people were experiencing the concentrated effect of modern cocaine. Chewing coca leaves produces a slower and milder stimulant effect. In high and difficult terrain, that could reduce fatigue, suppress hunger, and make hard physical work more bearable. So, was it getting high, taking medicine, or using an ancient performance enhancer? Yes, our categories are the part that fails. Far to the north, chemical analysis of dried peyote specimens from caves near the Rio Grande identified mescaline and placed some samples at more than 5,000 years old. Peyote can produce intense changes in perception, emotion, and the sense of meaning. But again, the archaeological evidence tells us that the plant was known and preserved. It cannot replay the experience inside a vanished mind. For something closer to direct proof of consumption, we can turn to a cave in California. At Pinwheel Cave, archaeologists recovered small, chewed bundles wedged into cracks in the ceiling. Chemical and microscopic analysis identified the plant as Datura, a powerful hallucinogenic plant. The site also contains a painted red pinwheel shape that may depict the plant's unfurling flower. This is not the cheerful and colorful version of psychedelia sold on a poster. Datura contains compounds that can produce delirium, confusion, amnesia, dangerous overheating, and realistic hallucinations that the user may be unable to distinguish from ordinary life. The difference between a ritual dose and a medical emergency is not a philosophical detail. Yet people used it. Not because ancient humans were too ignorant to understand danger, but because danger itself can create authority and meaning. Surviving an ordeal may mark adulthood. A frightening vision may be interpreted as contact with a spirit. A substance that temporarily removes a person from normal reality can become socially powerful precisely because it is not casual. And if chewing a plant was one doorway, fire opened another. High in the Pamir Mountains, at the Zhezhankal Cemetery in what is now western China, archaeologists found wooden braziers in tombs dating to around 2,500 years ago. Researchers analyzed the charred residue inside them and detected chemical markers of cannabis. More strikingly, the residue suggested plants with unusually high levels of the compound associated with cannabis intoxication. The likely scene was not a person privately smoking a neatly prepared product. Cannabis was heated over stones in braziers, probably during mortuary ceremonies, allowing the smoke to fill an enclosed or partially enclosed space. Picture the setting: thin mountain air, firelight, the smell of burning wood and unfamiliar resin, a dead member of the community nearby. Music or speech we cannot recover. Smoke building until breathing itself becomes participation. This is not simply a story about people discovering cannabis. It is an engineered environment. Heat releases compounds, an enclosed space concentrates them, a funeral supplies emotion. Collective expectation tells every person what the sensation means. Modern neuroscience calls part of this set and setting. The mind enters an altered state, and the surrounding environment shapes that state. Ancient people did not need the phrase, They had architecture, darkness, rhythm, masks, stories, and a group of people who already believed something important was about to happen. The chemical was only one author of the experience. Context wrote the rest. This also explains why archaeologists have to be careful. A burned plant is not automatically proof of recreational intoxication. Plants can be fuel, incense, insect repellent, perfume, or medicine. At an Iron Age site in Arabia, researchers recently identified residues of Syrian rue in ceramic censers. The plant contains potent alkaloids and has a long history of medicinal and ritual use. But the researchers cautioned that the amount and method may have been more suited to sensory or therapeutic fumigation than to producing hallucinations. Ancient residue is evidence, not a confession. A pot can tell us what touched it. It cannot tell us whether the person beside it saw a god, treated a cough, chased away insects, or simply thought the room smelled better. Sometimes, however, the evidence is trapped not in a pot, but inside a person. On the island of Minorca, a cave called Ezcaridex was used by Bronze Age communities for burial and ritual activity. Among the objects found, there were wooden containers holding locks of human hair. More than 3,000 years later, researchers tested strands from one individual and detected 3 psychoactive alkaloids: ephedrine, atropine, and scopolamine. Ephedrine is a stimulant. Atropine and scopolamine can come from plants in the nightshade family and alter perception, memory, and consciousness. Their presence in hair suggests repeated consumption over a period of months, not merely a plant brushing against the body during burial. The hair had also been carefully treated, combed, cut, and stored in decorated containers. That makes the discovery feel personal in a way pottery residue rarely does. Somebody consumed these substances. Somebody preserved part of that person. Somebody decided the hair mattered enough to protect in a hidden chamber. But even here, certainty has boundaries. We do not know whether the individual was a healer, a ritual specialist, a patient, or a person moving between several roles that modern language insists on separating. We do not know the exact plant, dose, sensation, or purpose. The evidence gives us chemistry. Culture remains partially behind a locked door. And this is where the most popular version of the story usually becomes misleading. We imagine the past as one endless psychedelic festival, with every cave painting explained by mushrooms and every unusual burial blamed on somebody having a very intense afternoon. That is entertaining. It is also archaeology performed with the scientific precision of guessing a password. People certainly altered their consciousness. But not every method involved swallowing a molecule. Sometimes the drug was the event itself. Stand up, move in the same rhythm for an hour, hear the same beat repeated until your attention has nowhere else to go. Breathe faster, stop eating, stay awake through the night, enter darkness, endure heat, cold, pain, or exhaustion, while everyone around you insists that you are crossing into another world. Your brain will not remain neutral. Repetitive rhythm captures attention and encourages the brain to track external timing. Dancing changes, breathing, circulation, balance, and body temperature. Prolonged exertion can release the body's own pain-reducing chemicals. Fasting alters metabolism and can produce weakness, sharpened focus, or perceptual changes. Sleep deprivation distorts attention and can eventually generate hallucinations. Rapid breathing lowers carbon dioxide in the blood, which may cause tingling, dizziness, muscle spasms, and a powerful sense that something extraordinary is happening. No plant is required. The human nervous system comes with a surprisingly large control panel, and several of the buttons are labeled, in effect, "Do not hold this down unless supervised." Modern experiments show that rhythmic drumming, sensory manipulation, meditation, and intensive breathing can all produce measurable changes in subjective consciousness. That does not prove exactly how a Paleolithic ceremony felt. It does prove that ancient communities had access to non-chemical tools capable of changing perception. Now combine them: night, fire, drums, repetitive movement, hunger, smoke, expectation. A leader who says the ancestors are close, 50 people breathing and moving together. At that point, asking which single ingredient caused the altered state may be like asking which single musician caused the concert. Ritual is a technology of combination. It arranges sound, place, fatigue, chemistry, fear, and social pressure until ordinary consciousness becomes difficult to maintain. And it offers something a molecule alone cannot provide: an explanation. If your body shakes in a random field, you may think you are ill. If it shakes inside a ceremony after 3 days of preparation while everyone sings the same song, you may believe a spirit has arrived. The physical sensation can be similar. The meaning changes everything, because altered consciousness solved more than one problem. First, pain. Ancient life contained injury, childbirth, infection, surgery without modern anesthesia, and chronic suffering with no convenient medical system waiting under fluorescent lights. Alcohol, opium, cannabis, stimulating leaves, and sedating plants could all become crude but valuable medicines. At late Bronze Age, burials in Tel Yehud, in what is now Israel, researchers found opium alkaloids and their breakdown products in ceramic vessels. The context suggests that opium had a role in funerary practices, but its precise use remains uncertain. It may have been consumed by the living, offered to the dead, used as medicine, or served several purposes at once. Second, endurance. A plant that suppresses hunger or fatigue is not merely recreational when you are climbing, hunting, carrying, marching, or working for hours. The same stimulant can be sacred in one setting and practical in another. Third, social bonding. People who sing, move, suffer, and recover together often feel unusually connected. Add intoxication, and normal social boundaries can loosen. Grief becomes communal. Fear becomes shared. A group does not merely believe the same story. For a few hours, its members may feel that they have entered it together. Fourth, authority. If only certain people know how to prepare a dangerous plant, guide the ceremony, and explain the visions, knowledge becomes power. The specialist controls access not just to a substance, but to an invisible world. And finally, curiosity. We should not make ancient people so solemn that they stop being human. Some experimentation was probably medical, some was religious, some was accidental, and some person, somewhere, almost certainly tried something because their friend said it made the goats behave strangely. Human beings investigate fire, caves, oceans, space, and the private messages of people they promised not to check. Of course, they investigated consciousness. But ancient use came with a cost that modern nostalgia often edits out. Natural does not mean safe. It means chemistry arrived without packaging. The concentration of an active compound can vary between plants, seasons, soils, and individual specimens. A preparation that caused visions last year might cause organ failure this year. Nightshade plants can produce fatal poisoning. Opioids can stop breathing. Smoke damages lungs. Alcohol creates accidents, violence, and dependence even when served from a historically charming bowl. And ritual control was not automatically compassionate. Altered states can make people suggestible, confused, frightened, and dependent on whoever claims to understand what is happening. A ceremony can heal. It can also coerce. Ancient societies were not wiser. What they often did possess, however, was structure. Access might be limited by age, status, season, or ceremony. A specialist might prepare the dose. The group might remain present through the experience. The event might include preparation before and interpretation afterward. That structure could reduce certain risks. It could also reinforce hierarchy and secrecy. The important point is not that ancient use was better. It was embedded. Modern chemistry changed that relationship. It isolated active molecules, increased purity, standardized doses, invented new compounds, and made powerful effects portable. A ritual that once required a plant, a season, a place, and a community could become a product that fits in a pocket and acts in minutes. The ancient world supplied chemical doors. The modern world installed elevators. Faster access can mean more reliable medicine. It can also mean that the brain's reward and pain systems are hit with a speed and intensity evolution never prepared them to negotiate. That is the real dividing line. Not sober ancestors versus intoxicated modern people. Humans have always altered consciousness. What changed was concentration, availability, speed, and the disappearance of context. Archaeologists are trying to reconstruct invisible experiences from stubbornly physical remains. A charred seed can identify a species, but not intention. Residue can prove contact, but not dosage. Hair can preserve months of chemical history, but not a single thought. A decorated cave can establish a setting, but not whether the person inside felt healed, terrified, ecstatic, or all three before breakfast. This is why responsible conclusions often sound less exciting than headlines. The evidence may show that a psychoactive plant was present. Context may suggest that it was consumed. Repeated association with burials or ceremonial spaces may support ritual use. But the statement that ancient humans used drugs to speak with gods usually contains more certainty than the ground actually gave us. The uncertainty does not weaken the story. It makes it more human. We can recover the molecule and still lose the meaning. We can know what entered a person's blood and remain unable to know what entered their world. Yet, across continents and thousands of years, the pattern is too consistent to ignore. People learned that fermentation could soften reality. Leaves could lend energy. Smoke could alter a room. Dangerous plants could generate visions. Rhythm, hunger, movement, isolation, and breath could push the mind into unfamiliar territory, even when no substance was available. They did not wait for modern drugs. They experimented with being human. Tonight, billions of people will change their consciousness on purpose. Some will drink to celebrate. Some will take medicine to stop pain. Some will chase pleasure. Some will try to sleep. Some will flee a memory. Some will sit in silence and follow their breathing until the border between self and world becomes less certain. The methods are modern. The impulse is ancient, because ordinary consciousness is useful, but it is not always bearable. It carries grief, fear, boredom, physical pain, and the exhausting knowledge that every life ends. An altered state can offer relief. It can also offer revelation, or at least the feeling of revelation, which from inside the experience may be impossible to distinguish. That is probably why ancient intoxication lived so often beside funerals, healing, initiation, and worship. These are the moments when ordinary language fails. When someone dies, when a child becomes an adult, when pain will not stop, when the future is uncertain, people search for a doorway that everyday consciousness cannot provide. Sometimes they found that doorway in fermented grain, sometimes in a bitter leaf, sometimes in smoke rising through firelight, and sometimes in the body itself, moving to a rhythm until the person who began the dance no longer felt exactly like the person inside it. Modern drugs did not invent the human desire to get high. They industrialized an old negotiation between the mind and its limits. For thousands of years, our ancestors studied the landscape and discovered that reality had hidden switches. They learned which ones dulled pain, which ones created energy, which ones opened visions, and which ones never allowed the experimenter to report back. That knowledge was preserved in vessels, ceremonies, songs, specialists, and warnings. Most of the songs are gone. The warnings are silent. The people who understood them have been dust for centuries, but traces remain. A chewed bundle in a cave, a chemical locked inside hair, a blackened brazier beside the dead, microscopic starch trapped in stone. Small pieces of evidence that point to one enormous truth. Human beings have never been content merely to possess consciousness. We have always wanted to test its edges,